Hi, my name is Kimberly from Zeebman Development. Today I'm going to give you a demonstration of Chimpegration Classic. This is our integration between Razor's Edge and MailChimp, working in database view with Razor's Edge. So when you go to the plugins area of Razor's Edge, you'll find Chimpegration is already installed. Once you open it up, there are three main areas of activity. We can update MailChimp, we can update Razor's Edge, and we can synchronize data between the two. So let's walk through each of these different areas in turn. So the first area I want to look at is updating MailChimp, and I want to export some of our Razor's Edge constituents into our audience. So let's first of all take a look at our audience in MailChimp. So we can see I've got this export demo audience and I've got 0 subscribers in here. So I want to add some subscribers from the Razor's Edge. So now we're going to export some of our Razor's Edge constituents into that audience. So let's select that from the menu. Select the audience we were just looking at. Choose our query or an export to export from Razor's Edge. We'll need to have set this up in advance and added any fields to the output that we want to push into MailChimp. Next, we can add both groups and tags to new records and existing records. So we can choose what we want from here, and we can either update or replace what's in MailChimp already. Next, we can choose to add new emails from our query or add new emails and update the existing records. So we're going to do both. And where people share an email address in Razor's Edge, we can determine which one we want to use based on the person who is the main constituent, or we can just pick the one from the first constituent found if we're not personalizing the email. Finally, we've got our mapping. So we can see the fields that I've put in the output of my query here, my MailChimp fields that I've set up here, and we simply need to double click to map those across. The email address is mandatory, as is the constituent ID, but all other fields are completely optional unless you've set them up as mandatory in your MailChimp audience. So let's run that export. Okay, let's go and take a look at our audience. So if we refresh, we've now got 16 contacts. So we can see the records here. We've got the favourite animal that we added, the birth date, we've got the last gift, and we've got the constituent ID. We can also see that tag I added of donor for all those records too. Now we can also bulk remove subscribers from an audience using the remove subscribers function here. We select the audience we want to work with. We'll use the same one. Now we can determine how we'd like to match the constituents. We can either match on constituent ID or email address. Because I know I've got the constituent ID in there, we know that's going to be an exact match. And then I can choose a query of subscribers to keep or a query of subscribers to remove. So the first option allows me to compare the users in a query and those on the MailChimp audience. And if people are no longer in the query, I can remove them from the audience. The second one just allows me to select the people to remove. So let's use that same query. And then we've got a number of different options. We can delete the subscriber altogether, we can unsubscribe them, we can remove them from a group, or we can remove the tag. So I'm going to unsubscribe those people from our list. And we can also choose not to remove subscribers that aren't in Razor's Edge, so we're not messing around with those records. Let's unsubscribe. So we can see that we've got 20 records to unsubscribe. If we take a look at the details, we can see all the records listed here. And if there are any that we don't want to unsubscribe, we can just uncheck the box to remove them from that. So let's say yes. And that's completed. If we go back to our audience and refresh again, and we can see that we're now down to 1 subscriber, which is the person I removed, and everybody else has been unsubscribed. So as well as exporting to an audience and removing subscribers from your audience, we can also push subscribers into an automation export using a query. So this allows us to add people to one of our automation workflows without them meeting any particular criteria in MailChimp. And now let's have a look at updating Razor's Edge. So we've got 3 different sections here. First of all, the main section that you're going to use very regularly is our Manage Campaigns area. And this allows you to bring back any mailing results from your campaigns to Razor's Edge. So that includes your bounces, your unsubscribes, people who mark you as spam, but also everyone you sent the email to and their open and click activity. So first of all, we can choose from either all the campaigns on an audience, which is useful if you've got historic data that hasn't been added to Razor's Edge. We can choose a specific campaign or a specific automation campaign. So I'm going to choose one from here. And we can also create a query of our updated constituents as well. Now we can hit next and we can choose how to match our constituents. So we can either match on email for all constituents, email for the main contact, or constituent ID. I'm going to match on email for all constituents because I want to add an action that shows who's been sent the email. So let's say next. And now we can choose where exactly we're going to pull the data from. So you might want to run this process more than once for a campaign because what you want to do with this data will vary depending on what you pull over. So I'm going to get everyone sent with their opens and clicks, and I'm going to add an action to those records. But I might want to come back and get my unsubscribes and add a consent record, or come back and get people who marked me as spam and remove their email from my database. Whatever you do, it's up to you. And you can choose that on the next screen. So you can see all of the different options here, and some of these are more relevant depending on the type of data you're bringing over. So for example, if you were bringing over your unsubscribed data, you might want to add a consent record, or you might want to mark as request no email or mark as do not contact. If you're bringing over your bounces, you might want to change the type to invalid email, delete it altogether, or set it as inactive. Or if you're bringing over people who mark you as spam, then you might want to delete the email or change the type to request no email. Whichever it is, you can choose that option here. You can also add an attribute, a solicit code, a consent, an action, or an appeal. And you can do multiples of these as well. So you can choose to do a couple of things when you're bringing that data over. So because I've got everybody sent as well as the open and click data, I want to add an action. When I click the action button, it shows me the native Razor's Edge functionality, and I can fill this in exactly as I would if it were a global ad. So I choose my action type and category. I can choose the action date. I can mark it as completed, and I can enter the email subject as well if I want to. However, we've also got options to add the email subject as an action notepad, and that will do that automatically. And it will add the opens and clicks as action attributes too. So let's save that. We've also got some options here around setting the dates. So we can choose the email dates for the action and the completed date if you're bringing in historic data that didn't happen today. With the appeals, you can add the appeal responses for the open and click data, but obviously that's only one response, so it won't be as detailed as the action attributes. So let's run that. And now let's go and find some of those records that we've updated. So let's open up this query, and we can see we've got 2 records that have been updated. So let's open up one of these records, go to the actions area, and we can see that action that I've just created here. If we open it up, we can see all the information I added as part of my global ad. But in addition, we've got in the attributes area, the campaign ID, which comes from MailChimp, the date the email was first opened, and any links that were clicked on. And if there are multiple links, then we'll see all of those here too. In addition, I've created the notepad that gives me the description, which is the subject line of the email as well. So it's really easy for anybody in Razor's Edge to see what email was sent and what somebody did with it. So as well as being able to bring our campaign results over, we can also bring over new records. So if you've got people signing up to your MailChimp audience directly on MailChimp or via a form on your website, we can bring those records in and add them as new constituent records in Razor's Edge. We can also look those people up in Razor's Edge and update their details if they exist already. And we can do that in 2 ways. One, we can do via import, and that just brings data from MailChimp to Razor's Edge. So that's useful if you know you've got a very large audience of people who definitely don't exist in your database. However, the synchronization process allows us to push data both ways between the two and compare the results. So this is a much better way of getting that data into Razor's Edge and choosing how to update a record field by field. Before we take a look at that, we'll take a quick look at how we can manage our audiences. And this just allows us to add a consent record for our all-time unsubscribes, our all-time subscribes, or an attribute for our star ratings. So this is useful when you first get started to update your records in Razor's Edge with historic MailChimp data. So the synchronization allows us to push data both ways between Razor's Edge and MailChimp. We can do this with either constituent data or non-constituent relationship records. They work in exactly the same way, but obviously they have different fields, so we run them as two separate processes. Let's take a look at the constituent synchronization. First of all, we need to select our audience. And now we can run through the synchronization process. So the first thing we need to do is select a query of constituents to synchronize with this audience. And this query just needs to contain people that we want to push out. Anybody who's in the MailChimp audience will be looked up across the entirety of Razor's Edge. We can also synchronize a segment of our MailChimp audience if we don't want to run it across the entire audience, particularly if it's a very large one. And we can choose to either bring in only new subscribers, only existing subscribers, or both. And this just means that if we don't want to add subscribers as constituents in Razor's Edge, we can ignore those records. I'm going to create queries of my created and updated constituents as well, so I can easily find them and check those records later. In the mapping area, this works very similarly to what we saw before. So we've got a tree of Razor's Edge fields on the left. We've got the MailChimp fields here, and we just double click to add the appropriate field to the MailChimp field. Once those are matched, we can then run the synchronization. We can also synchronize our groups, and we can do this in a number of different ways. So our MailChimp groups can match with anything that we've got in Razor's Edge across constituent codes, solicit codes, attributes, or consent records. So you can see here that I've got people asking for information about animals, and I'm synchronizing that with the attribute category of favorite animal. I've also got a more complex setting here, which allows people to choose what they receive from us in terms of communications. And I've got that set up as a consent record. So we can see here that if somebody has the group in MailChimp, we add the opt-in consent. If they don't have it, we add the opt-out consent in Razor's Edge. And the same for mail and social and phone. So these are all the options we're giving people in MailChimp, and this is how we then push that data into Razor's Edge. We can also work with solicit codes at the same time, but I've got automation set up around solicit codes that automatically happen when I change my consent, so I don't need to do that for now. And then finally, we've got some settings. These settings allow you to make sure that your records are going to go into Razor's Edge and update existing records in a way that's in line with your Razor's Edge business rules and standards. So for example, we can work out what to do with fields that don't exist in your Razor's Edge code tables. We can mark email addresses as primary. We can add default constituent codes or attributes. And we can back up addresses when we add a new one so we don't ever lose our address history. And then finally, we can choose when to run the synchronization from. So ordinarily it will run from the last date that we ran it, but we can change that. And we can review all our records, show our conflicts for review so we can see all the differences that are going to happen. And we can save these settings as well, so we're not running through this process every time. So let's run that synchronization. So before any data gets committed into Razor's Edge, we'll get to our review screen. And here we can see the Razor's Edge data on the left, the MailChimp data on the right, and the action to take column in the center is showing us which direction the data is going to flow. So we can see that this record is a new record from MailChimp. It doesn't exist in Razor's Edge, so all the fields are going to be pushed across into Razor's Edge to create this record. However, that's obviously going to create a constituent ID, and that will get pushed back out to MailChimp so that next time we run the synchronization, we can match these records exactly. We've also got the group information here. So this person has chosen what they want to receive information about and their contact preferences when they've signed up. And so we can add those to Razor's Edge straight away. We've got another record exactly the same here. And another one here as well. So 3 new records. Here we've got an address update, so we're going to push this new address into Razor's Edge and back up the old one. And finally, we've got a record that exists in both Razor's Edge and MailChimp, but we don't have the constituent ID in MailChimp yet. So we're going to add that on the way out and bring those mailing preferences in for that new sign up. So if you're happy with all of that, we can process the records. So as you can see, the synchronization is now complete, and we can see a summary of where data was updated and created on the screen here. This will also be in our control report as well, so we can find that later. So let's go and take a look at our records in Razor's Edge that we've created and updated. So we can see we've got some updated records and some created records. Let's take a look at one of the brand new ones. We can see here that we've added all the basic information we've got about this person. We've got their email address marked as primary. We've got a postal address. We've got the first name and surname. And we've also got some solicit codes, which have come from the consent record that we've created. So we can see here that we've opted into email and opted out of everything else. And that's created those solicit codes as well. We've also got the default constituent code of friend for a new record. And we've got some attributes, our default attribute as well as the favourite animal attribute that came over from his groups in MailChimp. Let's take a look at an updated record. We can see this record here. If we go to the addresses tab, we've added this new address as the preferred one. We've marked it as preferred and said to send mail. We've changed the type here to a previous address, and we've unchecked the send mail box as well. So that's all backed up, and we've got the most up-to-date data in Razor's Edge without losing what we had previously. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of everything you can achieve with Chimpegration Classic. If you're using Razor's Edge NXT, you also have access to our Chimpegration integration for the cloud, and you can see a demo of that on our website too. Please do get in touch, and you've also got the option for a 2-week trial of Chimpegration Classic, which you can activate in your Razor's Edge at any time. Thanks for listening.